giunge dall'Olanda e che ci parlerà dell'introduzione della patente di guida con il Bioptic in Olanda. E quindi partiamo con il filmato e poi vi presento il dottor Kojimann.
It's been interesting growing up with achromatopsia. I remember in the public school system where I grew up, it was confusing for my teachers as well as family members. They didn't know what it was. They didn't understand that simply sitting in the front row of a classroom, that didn't mean that I'd be able to see the chalkboard. They didn't understand that. So for pretty much most of my preliminary education up through the time I graduated from high school, I managed to do that without actually being able to see the chalkboard, something I guess I'm kind of proud of. But they didn't understand that I needed a telescope, and they didn't understand that I am very light sensitive, and all the unusual dynamics of having achromatopsia. I will say, however, that it helped me to be resilient and resourceful, and I have managed to overcome this unusual condition and live a pretty healthy and normal life. For people with achromatopsia, one of the biggest challenges is that of filtering light. Our eyes, my eyes in particular, are extremely light sensitive. Throughout the years, the only way I had to contend with that was through the use of various sunglasses, various colors of sunglass lenses and so forth. And then I came across the red central lenses. Now the red central lenses have been nearly miraculous in terms of helping me filter light. And in addition to that, because I am completely colorblind, the red central lenses actually provide the opportunity for me to distinguish the difference in some colors. Now, I wouldn't be able to tell one what those colors are, but for example, with these lenses in, I can see the difference between red and black. Although I wouldn't be able to say that's red and that's black, I can tell that there's a difference. Whereas without them, I don't see any difference in those two colors. Indoors, they're great for filtering overhead fluorescent lighting, which has always been a problem. It's always actually been quite painful to sit under fluorescent lighting. Out of doors, the red central lenses combined with a pair of just regular gray tinted sunglasses provide a really clear and comfortable light. The particular combination of color for my lenses are a combination of black and red, and when they're placed upon my blue eyes, it actually gives my eyes an appearance of being brown, as opposed to, say for example, a bright red. So they've worked extremely well for me, not only from a practical standpoint, but also from an aesthetic standpoint as well. It was quite a process to actually be able to be certified to drive with a Bioptic. It required training from the state, and every year I have to pass the vision exam, like I say, on an annual basis. But being able to drive, a lot of people may take for granted the fact that driving is interwoven into practically every aspect of our day-to-day lives. So being able to drive with the Bioptic has just been tremendous and wonderful in terms of my sense of freedom and my sense of independence. So it's been wonderful.
Questa esperienza di un acromate che vive negli Stati Uniti perché ci sembrava importante farvi capire che in altri paesi si può accedere alla patente di guida con questi sistemi Bioptic. Abbiamo la fortuna oggi di avere qui con noi una persona che ha lavorato all'introduzione del Bioptic, della licenza di guida con Bioptic in Europa, in Olanda in particolare. Lo invito a venire, è il dottor, spero di dire bene il suo cognome, Kojimann.
Sorry?
Your surname, your
First name?
first name is your name, because it's not easy to say.
My first name is Art, and my family name is Kooijman.
We are very curious to understand how you reached this important goal. Siamo molto curiosi di sapere come è riuscito a introdurre la licenza di guida con i sistemi Bioptic in Olanda, perché ci piacerebbe riuscire a farlo anche in Italia.
Okay, thank you for the invitation to speak here about bioptic driving. Bioptic driving, you saw a very short, what is a bioptic. First of all, I show you what can be called a bioptic telescope. Bioptic means there are two optics in it. The normal optic is the regular glass in the spectacle, the carrier glass, and in the regular glass is a hole drilled, and there's a small telescope in this spectacle glass. So if I use this spectacle, I can look underneath the telescope and look at you all. And if I want to see someone in particular, I can look through the telescope and see his face or a sign 3 times magnified. So in that way I can read a sign at the street, etc. It's not really easy to learn to do that. I can, if you want, you can see this, you can give it around. I appreciate to get it back again. Normally the telescope is placed in a special position in relation to your eye. So I'm sure it's not on the right place for your eye now. So it's even more difficult than you have your own customized spectacle. Now I want to start with this talk as I planned it. My own spectacle again. And we started a project on vision in lower visual acuity. We started a project already in 1996 as a first project. From this project on, we developed the Bioptic driving project. But to give you an idea in what sort of environment we did the research, it might be interesting to say that the Netherlands has about 17 million inhabitants, and about 300,000 of them are visually impaired. And in Holland, we have 2 big rehabilitation institutes. One is called Royal Dutch Visio, and the other is called Bartimeus. And together they have 5,500 employees. So these big organizations are able to start such a project, what I'm talking about. as I said, we start the project on bioptic driving as a second project after the first one. The bioptic driving project started in 2009, and it started in 2008 or 7, and it was legalized in 2009. And nowadays, we have in Holland about 100 licensed bioptic drivers. In the requirements for vision in the law, it's required that your visual acuity should be 0.5 or better. And so that can be measured on a chart like this one. But if we look in the real world, we see that hardly anything is black on white. For instance, in this picture, you hardly see any black and you hardly see any white, but you have just to see how the road is going. And to give a better idea about visual acuity and vision, I made some pictures of a normal crossing, a normal street. And at the right side, I included a visual acuity chart and a contrast sensitivity chart. And this picture is the best what can be projected with the, let's say, the regular projection apparatus. And it is, from the visual acuity chart, you can conclude that this is a picture which corresponds with a visual acuity of 0.64. And I can degrade the picture a little bit, and then we have a picture which corresponds to a vision of 0.5. And what you can see is you can read the signs. Maybe for a lot of you it's difficult, but I can assure you on the picture you can read the signs. You can clearly see the structure of the road. You can clearly see all cars coming up and where the special path for the bicycles is. If I degrade the picture further on to a visual acuity of 0.16, then it's still easy to see the road and to see the upcoming cars. There's no doubt where the cycle path is, but you have difficulties to read the signs. It's impossible. And that's just the difference between a visual acuity of 0.5 and 0.16 or even 0.1. You can clearly see the road, you can see the other cars, but you have problems to read the signs. And to reach the visual acuity of 0.5, if you have a visual acuity of 0.16, you have to have a magnifier of 3 times. 3 times 0.16, it's about 0.5. And that, if you apply that, then you can see, for instance, that near the traffic light, there is a pedestrian waiting for his green light. As I said, first we started with a project in which we confirmed the driving licensing authorities that they denied a driver's license to many people, and when they were when they accepted that message, we could go on to start with a bioptic driving project. And a very important difference between some sorts of assessments is that if you go to an ophthalmologist or an optician and he measures your visual acuity, that's what we call the medical fitness to drive. You have to pass a visual acuity of 0.5. But medical fitness to drive is not necessarily related to a practical fitness to drive. And the practical fitness to drive is done by an expert of the driving licensing authority, and you have to drive during 1 hour through different conditions, and that expert at the end of that 1 hour driving will tell whether you are driving safely or not. The problem that we have if your visual acuity is below 0.5 is that there's a strict European rule that your visual acuity should be 0.5. And nobody is allowed to make it lower. But you have to reach that visual acuity of 0.5 with an optical correction. And which optical correction is not specified or limited. So we introduced the optical correction as 3 times magnifier. And we made the Bioptic telescope system. This is a picture of the Bioptic telescope system, which is going around now in the audience. Normally, the subject is looking underneath the Bioptic telescope, looking at the street, only driving with his, let's say, own visual acuity. Only if there's some specific aspect that attract his attention, then he has to look through the telescope, like when you are looking in your rear view mirror. When you are driving and you look in the rear view mirror, you have just to look for 1 second. If you are looking for 10 seconds, you are not longer on the road, but on this beside the road, and you will have an accident. So that's the same with this Bioptic telescope. You have to look only 1 second through the telescope. And if you can't see it in 1 second, you have to do it a second time or a third time. And you look through the telescope just by a small nod of your head, because then the light of sight is through the telescope. We had a research consortium of the Rehabilitation Institute, Royal Dutch Visio, and we had 2 institutes of the university, the Ophthalmology Institute and a Traffic Medicine Institute. We did this project together with a driving school and together with the licensing authority. And we started this project in 2004. And the ultimate goal, the ultimate aim of the project is to get it legalized. So at the end of the project, we had to send a proposal to the Ministry of Traffic, and then we had to wait until the time they decided to sign it. In the project, we had some feedback partners, like the ophthalmologists, and like the societies of the visually impaired people, to know that, to inform them about our progress and to get their feedback about the procedures. At the end, the licensing authority got the evidence that we were able to select people who are driving safely and who are driving not safely. And from the moment on that we got the legalization in Holland about this driving with a bioptic telescope, we were the first country outside the USA that has legalized this type of driving, and the first country in Europe to have it. There are some limitations when you drive a car in Holland. You have to use a car with an automatic gear, and you are not allowed to drive at night. So only in daily hours you are allowed to drive. And a third limitation is that you are not to go to Germany or Belgium or other countries because your driving license is not valid in those countries. Okay, we had a lot of training sessions. I go through this. The protocol at the moment is that when a subject wants to get a driver's license and his visual acuity is too low, he go to the Rehabilitation Institute of Visio. His vision is assessed. He will be tested with a telescope, and he has to reach a visual acuity of 0.5 with that telescope. The subject should have a clear motivation to drive independently. We are not pressing people to start to drive. The subject has had the will to drive himself. There should be no additional restrictions of the visual field, no neuropsychological deficits, and before we start the further training program, he or she has a screening driving lesson, and the instructor might advise the subject, you have, in my opinion, the opportunities to get a good driver, to become a good driver, or the driver instructor might have some doubts about that, and in that case you have to be prepared that you need many, many lessons, and it will be very expensive, of course, because the driving lessons you have to pay for yourself. The exclusion to go to the next phase is that you do not pass the optometric test, that you have a 0.5 visual acuity. You do not pass a neuropsychological test. Is this, can I have a clean glass? Oh, there. And the driving screening is negative. And at the end, you make up your own mind. Will I go on or will I not go on? If you go on, you will get a spectacle with the telescope mounted in the glass. And you go to the mobility instructor to get used to find objects in the environment. So the first training is to find on the wall certain numbers and to become fast to see that. The next phase is that you see traffic-related slides, and you have to find some aspects as signs and cars coming up. And the third phase is to go outside, looking at the traffic. Do you see that car? Can you read the number plate? Is there a man or a female behind the wheel or something like that? And you go to a shop with a very cluttered environment, and you have to find certain things. So step by step you will get more adapted to the use of this telescope. The last part with the mobility trainer is to be a passenger in a car, in a riding car, and then you have to find the various signs and other aspects while you are driving. If you have passed this procedure with the mobility trainer, you go to a driving school. And we certified a number of driving schools in Holland to do the training with a bioptic telescope. So you have a specialized driving school, specialized instructor, and you have a car with an automatic transmission. You have to have a number of lessons, and I can give you an example of the driving by a subject with a bioptic telescope. Let's say a first lesson. Now I have to know how to start this. Yes, I hope it's going on. I tested this on a Windows computer, so I'm not so sure about that. No. Okay. I'm afraid I have to skip that. Yeah, okay, if you know. Maybe you go. Okay. You have to believe me. You have to believe me. He passed the test, but the subject has to do a number of lessons in the driving school, and if the driving instructor is satisfied by his driving or her driving, he can go to the licensing authority, the CBR in Holland, and he has to do a practical fitness to drive test. It takes 1 hour, and at the end, the expert can tell whether he or she can have a driver's license. In between, we have now a system in Holland with 31 optometrists, 25 mobility trainers, 6 clinical physicists, 5 neuropsychologists. Yeah, there are 2 lines on each other, but I guess 20 driving schools and a number of experts of the licensing authority in the north, northwest, southwest, and the south of Holland. So in every region, you can find a whole team that can train you up to the driver's license. Now, at the end, I can conclude that I told already that at the moment there are about 100 people licensed with a bioptic telescope, and by the time we experience that from other countries in Europe, there becomes some interest in more information of this type of driving, and that's also the reason that I'm speaking here, I guess. Thank you. Thank you. If you have questions, I'm happy to.
Noi ringraziamo il professor Kooijman. Ci sono domande per questo speaker? Ok. There is some question for you.
Ok, allora vorrei fare una domanda perché ci sono alcuni punti che non mi sono chiari in merito alla sua esposizione. Allora, lei in senso generale ha progettato uno strumento che permette di portare persone che hanno una scarsa basso grado visivo a usufruire di uno strumento che è la guida dell'autovettura. Ecco, questo in senso generale. Però oggi noi qui abbiamo persone che sono affette da acromatopsia, dove la fotofobia è, diciamo, una parte molto rilevante nella malattia. Come si concilia? Cioè, ecco, quando lei diceva in Olanda abbiamo concesso forse 315.000 patenti, ecco, quanti sono gli acromati che hanno questa tipologia di idoneità alla guida? Perché mi sembra che, almeno io non capisco come si possa conciliare una persona che di giorno chiude gli occhi perché c'è la luce, a poter avere la visione tanto da essere abilitato alla guida. Ecco, questo non ho capito, se cortesemente è così gentile da spiegarmelo. Sì, grazie.
Ok, prima avevamo visto un filmato comunque di un acromate negli Stati Uniti che guidava. Ok, ok.
Ok.
Ecco, anche le leggi che parlava lei in Olanda permettono di guidare di giorno e non di notte, quando gli acromati vedono meglio di notte e non di giorno. Ecco, questo va bene, grazie.
Okay. Thank you for
Volevo aggiungere una cosa. Io con la mia famiglia sono stata a Indianapolis 2 anni fa e abbiamo provato questo Bioptic al centro di Indianapolis. Mio fratello, che ha il blu con al monocromatismo con il blu, ha provato questo sistema e ha fatto 4-5 lezioni di guida. Chiaramente aveva degli occhiali da sole magenta, color magenta, con sopramontato il Bioptic. Lui ha fatto alcune ore di lezione e abbiamo iniziato, diciamo, un training, poi non vivendo lì non abbiamo proseguito, era semplicemente per capire come funzionava e se vivendo lì e continuando il training avrebbe potuto ottenere poi alla fine la licenza di guida. E questo percorso sembrava realizzabile. Questa è una strada, diciamo, che abbiamo voluto mostrarvi perché chiaramente, avendola provata, essendo stata introdotta, la mia domanda è un'altra. Se noi volessimo fare un percorso analogo in Italia e riuscire a introdurre questo tipo di patente, anche solo di giorno per il momento, non ci interessa che sia giorno e notte, che cosa dobbiamo fare? Dobbiamo lavorare con chi? Ci sono altre domande?
Beh, la faccio io, parlo io per lei. No, vabbè, posso parlare io? No, sì, vieni qui con me. Allora, giustamente una persona mi dice, io sono acromate, purtroppo però la mia acromatopsia è molto importante e quindi a questo punto mi sentirei in difficoltà, giusto, a dire che guido.
Sì, nel senso che io a volte anche con i filtri, con le lenti scurissime, mi trovo abbagliata dalla luce e in cecità totale a volte, anche se ho i filtri, tanto che non posso andare in giro a volte senza il mio cane perché mi trovo in queste situazioni. Mi chiedo io a questo punto in che modo si possa anche adattare sui filtri questo strumento, in che modo possa aiutarci.
Rispondo io e poi risponde il professore. Allora, secondo me bisogna valutare una cosa, come ti ho appena detto, in questa sala abbiamo una 70 di acromati, non lo so quanti in totale. Ovviamente ognuno di voi è diverso dall'altro, ovvero abbiamo alcuni la BCM, qualcuno la cromatopsia sul B3, altri sulla 3, però non siamo tutti uguali, non abbiamo avuto tutti la stessa esperienza e lo stesso tipo di riabilitazione, parliamo ancora da piccini. Allora a questo punto io vi dico, sicuramente in questa sala ci sarà un'alta percentuale che dice io non proverò mai perché di sicuro non me la sento di provare. Ce ne sarà un'altra percentuale che dice io posso provare, mi sento in grado di provare, però a questo punto io dico un momento, tu potrai provare quando la cosa è confermata, è valida, avrai effettuato il percorso di 30 ore o più affinché tu comunque guidi in assoluta sicurezza, non tanto per te, perché vuoi provare, ma soprattutto per gli altri. Allora, noi non possiamo dire no in assoluto, perché non è giusto, perché non ci sono solo gli acromati, ci sono anche gli ipovedenti, che però non sono ipovedenti tanto da dire non possiamo guidare, però non lo sono per la legge italiana, perché in Belgio con 3 decimi si può guidare e non serve nessuna limitazione. Allora quelli del Belgio sono più bravi di noi che con 3 decimi guidano e noi no. Io non sono qui per dire usiamo il Bioptic, assolutamente, lo si usa se ci è concesso, però noi non possiamo, come non possiamo pretendere di dire noi assolutamente no perché siamo acromati, perché abbiamo la fotofobia, e ripeto, mio figlio di fotofobia ne ha molta, quindi voglio dire, non è che sono qui a dire no, non si può fare, però bisogna concedere, qualora potesse essere, anche a chi vuole provare, che magari è solo ipovedente, come detto prima, o acromate e che si sente di farlo, di poterlo fare. Ovviamente se poi qualcuno non se la sente non lo fa, e questo per me è la cosa più giusta. Poi lascio rispondere al professore.
I'm afraid I cannot give an answer that long.
Io volevo chiedere 2 cose. La prima è perché monocolo e non binocolo negli occhiali? E la seconda, noi acromati, non avendo la percezione della profondità, com'è che facciamo a vedere se arriva una macchina da lontano oppure no? C'è questo.
I had some difficulties to understand the second part of your question.
E no, perché allora noi acromati non abbiamo la percezione della profondità e quindi volevo sapere se dovessimo guidare come possiamo fare cioè come faremo a vedere se le macchine arrivano, cioè a che distanza sono o se arrivano verso di noi. Non so se mi sono spiegata.
Transmitter on the wrong place, so I didn't hear this.
Okay, she spoke about deep perception.
For driving, you have no real depth. You do not need.